Welcome to Grammy's garden. Well, we're not in the garden actually, we're in the kitchen. So we're going to talk about drying herbs in this one. We're getting towards the end of the summer and all the harvest that's being pulled in and everything. Mustn't forget the culinary herbs that we have growing out in the garden. You want to realize that when you do dry your herbs, they are going to be 3 to 4 times stronger than if you were using fresh. So what I have here is rosemary, I have some sage, I have some mint, thyme, this is oregano, I have some dill, some chives, and a whole bunch of basil. Anyway, so you want to harvest your herbs before they flower. This time of year, basil is more than likely flowering, but I did have some huge cut back. I cut it all back and I processed way back in late July, and I'm getting all sorts of new growth, and that's what I have right here. So good time again to put away more basil for wintertime use in the kitchen. Okay, so let me just say, I have my rosemary in a pot, and that's because in New York, rosemary is an annual. It's not a perennial. It will not come back from rootstock. It will just die. So I bring mine in every fall and let it hang out in the winter and then take it back outside. I've already made some harvesting from this. This is rather small this year. It's usually a lot larger. Anyway, so there's a number of different ways that we can preserve our harvest of culinary herbs. The first one is by air drying, and I think it's probably the most familiar one. You want to use herbs that have a low moisture content. That's, for instance, that is rosemary. Thyme is another one, which would be a low moisture one. Oregano, and also mint. So, and the best way to do this is to tie it up in bundles. And I did this one with my thyme. This thyme has already started to dry out. It's been in this bundle, hanging in a well-ventilated area, not exposed to the sunshine. And it has been drying very nicely. You want to keep your eye on it to make sure there's no mold. You want to, another thing, backing up, you want to harvest, probably the best time would be in the morning after the dew has evaporated off of your leaves. You can give them a quick rinse and let them dry again, and then you bundle them up, and I just hang them from a push pin. Actually, this guy was hanging in my stairways down to the cellar. So I have, this is pretty well done. This was bundled up. This was mint. This was bundled up back over a week ago. So it is dry, very crispy leaves, and it's ready to go into storage, I think, right now. So keep your eye on them. What you want to do to store them is store them in, I prefer glass jars. This is a very small one. This actually has thyme in it from last year. If you can, strip all of the dried leaves off as whole as possible, because if you just crush them all up and put them in their storage container already, they'll release a lot of their aromatic oils, and you won't have the potency that you really want. So whole leaves as much as possible before then you crunch them up and use them in your dishes. So glass jars, tight fitting top. Once you do put them in here though, keep your eye on them for a few weeks to make sure that they are totally dry. Look at them, make sure there's no more moisture in them. If there is, lay it out, let it dry some more. If there's any rot or mold, you're just gonna have to pitch the whole thing because that will spread through your batch like crazy. So that's one way of doing it. Another way, and I like to do this with herbs that have a higher moisture content, for instance, basil. You know, everybody knows these basil leaves are very tender, very extremely fragrant. Anyway, I'll just take a bunch of leaves, lay them all together, kind of roll them up into kind of a log, and just chop them up. I think the French call this chiffonade. I try to avoid the stems, but here you have a nice, oh, how aromatic is that? It smells so good. Anyway, basil. Then I take an ice cube tray and I just pop these into a little segment of an ice cube tray. Now, of course, I'm going to do a whole lot. I'm going to fill up a number of ice cube trays. There's two ways that you can continue. You can either fill this up with water right up to the top and then freeze it. And then it can go into soups and stews and whatever you use. There's really not much water in there. You're not going to be watering down your dish very much. Or you could also fill it up with olive oil. And then if you wanted, you could use olive oil, garlic, pine nuts, whirl it all up in a hand mixer, and voila, you have pesto. And then you can do pesto in ice cube trays and take out whatever you need. So this is a way to do the higher moisture leaves. I'm going to be doing this with my chives. This is like my second thing of chives. The chives always already went to flower. They flower in the spring. So I had an early cutting of chives, and this is just some leftover extra stuff. It's not as potent as the early spring, but I'm still going to do it. I'm also going to do it with a little bit of dill. I usually use most of my dill for pickling and stuff, but I will chop this up again, put it into ice cube trays, not the olive oil. I would just use plain water, and that will give me a lot. The seed heads are particularly flavorful and fragrant, so you certainly want to include those in your saving right there. So another way to save herbs would be to dry them in the oven. Now, don't turn on the oven, or you turn it on to its very lowest setting. Unfortunately, my cilantro had an accident in the oven, and before that had gone to seed, I had a whole bunch of cilantro, and I went to the next day or something. It was just parked, sitting out in the oven, drying nicely. Well, I flipped on the oven and forgot that it was in there. Was going to go bake something else, and that just fried it. So that batch had to go. But I do have more cilantro coming. I did a second planting, and that's going to be, I'm going to dry that when it's ready. If not, I'll use it fresh for salsa. So that is another way. Yeah, lowest setting in your oven, pilot light if you have a gas oven, just a regular oven light, and set a timer so you know to take it out and not start the oven to cook dinner in. So anyway, all of these things I'm going to start drying because it is towards the end of the summer. I don't want to lose any of it. I have, this is mint, yeah, and so you can use this in teas and things like that. I have chamomile that I've already dried, so mint and chamomile together are an awesome combination in a tea. So, and then I've got my sage, excellent in soups and stews. That for me comes back as a perennial every single year. And that's what I'm going to be doing with my harvesting of my culinary herbs. I'll probably get into some different ones next year, but this is really all that I had time and space to grow this year. So, all right, I wish you the best of luck. Even if you go to the market and you get some fresh herbs off the grocery shelf, consider drying a few of them. You go to the farmer's market, pick up a huge bouquet of dill or a huge bouquet of basil, and process that up, the basil into pesto or just into ice cube trays full. It'll serve you well throughout the winter season. All right, happy gardening. We'll see you again. Bye. Here I am again. I'm in my studio, and I have a question. Nora asked, have you ever found a little pepper inside a big pepper? Well, yeah, I have, but I haven't really given it very much thought. So I had to go and do a little bit of research. The scientific community doesn't know too much about this, except they do have a name. It's usually called an internal proliferation. Internal meaning inside, proliferation meaning an extra growth. So oftentimes they're irregular, convoluted, but they're always sterile, meaning any seeds that you would get from that tiny little pepper are never going to produce another pepper plant with peppers on it. So, but what causes it, they don't seem to know. They don't think a change of temperature has anything to do with it. They don't think fertilizing it has anything to do with it. They just don't know. It's not a trait that pepper producers like to see. So it's often, it is usually an inheritable trait, so passed on in a variety of peppers that you grow. So if you're growing peppers and it has it, oftentimes that type of pepper will always have it. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's actually pretty good, because when you think about it, you're getting a second pepper for free. So go ahead and eat that pepper. It's just as good as the big outside pepper. And so I want to thank you, Nora, for that question. Very good. Okay, stay tuned, everybody. And here is our winner.